All right, Genesis chapter 22 and 23. Abraham tested. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you.
What did he say?
Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, Father. Yes, my son, Abraham replied. The fire and wood are here, Isaac said, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son.
No. Wait.
But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy.
Pranked.
He said, do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me. Then Abraham returned to his servants, and they set off together for Beersheba, and Abraham stayed in Beersheba. Nahor's sons. Sometime later, Abraham was told, Milcah is also a mother. She has borne sons to your brother Nahor. Uz the firstborn, Buz his brother, Kemuel the father of Aram, Kesed, Hazo, Pildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. Bethuel became the father of Rebekah. Milcah bore these 8 sons to Abraham's brother Nahor. His concubine, whose name was Reumah, also had sons, Tebah, Gaham, Tahash, and Maacah. Chapter 23, the death of Sarah. Sarah lived to be 127 years old. She died at Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham went to mourn for Sarah and to weep over her. Then Abraham rose from beside his dead wife and spoke to the Hittites. He said, I am a foreigner and stranger among you. Sell me some property for a burial site here so I can bury my dead. The Hittites replied to Abraham, Sir, listen to us. You are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will refuse you his tomb for burying your dead. Then Abraham rose and bowed down before the people of the land, the Hittites. He said to them, If you are willing to let me bury my dead, then listen to me and intercede with Ephron, son of Zohar, on my behalf. So he will sell me the cave of Machpelah, which belongs to him and is at the end of his field. Ask him to sell it to me for the full price as a burial site among you. Ephron the Hittite was sitting among his people, and he replied to Abraham in the hearing of all the Hittites, who had come to the gate of his city. No, my lord, he said, listen to me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of my people. Bury your dead. Again, Abraham bowed down before the people of the land, and he said to Ephron in their hearing, Listen to me, if you will. I will pay the price of the field. Accept it from me so I can bury my dead there. Ephron answered Abraham, Listen to me, my lord. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver, but what is that between you and me? Bury your dead. Abraham agreed to Ephron's terms and weighed out for him the price he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weight current among the merchants. So Ephron Ephron's field and Machpelah near Mamre, both the field and the cave in it, and all the trees within the borders of the field, was deeded to Abraham as his property in the presence of all the Hittites who had come to the gate of the city. Afterward, Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, which is at Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave in it were deeded to Abraham by the Hittites as a burial site. Chapter 22, verses 1 through 2. By this point in the narrative, the promised son Isaac had become a young man. Abraham's dream had come true, but into this paradise God suddenly said, "Take your son and offer him as a burnt offering."
What?
The author says this was God's way of testing Abraham, and what a devastating test it was. In its most basic terms, this test was a choice between God's blessing and God himself. Would Abraham obey God and respond in faith, even though God's new command was just as baffling and even more painful than any command he had previously been given? The command is fraught with apparent contradictions. God's command seemed to contradict God's promises. How could God command murder? And how could such an action be explained to Sarah? Verse 3, how would Abraham respond? The answer is given in that little clause. Abraham got up early in the morning. God told Abraham to give up the one blessing in his life that he treasured most, a legitimate son. Abraham's response was to obey immediately. He may not have understood how God would provide, but he knew that God would provide. So he avoided the counterfeits of partial obedience and delayed obedience, which are both really disobedience anyway. Following God boldly into the unknown. Verse 4 through 6. When Abraham and Isaac reached the mountain, Abraham told his servants, "The boy and I will go over there to worship. Then we'll come back to you." Somehow Abraham believed that he would be coming back down the mountain with Isaac. The book of Hebrews helps us understand what was going on in his head. The writer notes that Abraham considered God to be able even to raise someone from the dead. Hebrews 11:19. Abraham knew God's promise that Isaac would continue the line of blessing, but he also knew that God had commanded him to sacrifice Isaac. The only conclusion he could draw was that God would bring him back from death. Abraham's belief in resurrection seems odd, especially when we realize that there had been no recorded instances of resurrection to this point. But don't forget, Abraham had already seen God's resurrection power. Sarah's womb had been dead for 25 years. Abraham himself was past the age for bearing children too. The author of Hebrews says that in terms of reproduction, the couple was as good as dead. Hebrews 11:12. Yet from this death, God brought new life. Abraham may not have had a front row seat to a literal resurrection, but he knew that the same resurrecting power that brought Isaac into the world would somehow keep him in it. Verse 7 through 8. The situation began to get awkward when Isaac noticed the lack of an animal. Abraham responded by reassuring Isaac that God himself would provide the lamb for the burnt offering. Abraham knew he was in a situation that he couldn't fix. What he'd been asked to do felt like a contradiction, but instead of unraveling the contradiction himself, he decided to wait on God. Therefore, when God puts you in a contradiction that has no apparent solution, he alone must be trusted to resolve it. Verse 9 through 12. When the moment of truth finally came, Abraham reached out and took the knife to slaughter his son. Thankfully, the angel of the Lord called out to him before he made the cut. Then this individual said something strange. "Now I know," he said, "that you fear God, since you have not withheld your only son from me." Many Bible students scratch their heads at this because it sounds like God legitimately didn't know how Abraham would act. But God knows everything factual and potential. He hasn't, however, personally experienced everything he knows. For example, he knows all about sin, but he has never personally experienced committing sin, and never will. God had not yet experienced Abraham's obedience. He delights in experiencing what he already knows to be the case, just as a wife delights in experiencing the love that her husband proclaims. God wants to feel our commitment. This is why he became a man, so that he could sympathize with our weakness. Verse 13. At the same time God stopped Abraham from sacrificing Isaac, Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. God's timing is funny like that. The ram must have been there the entire time, but Abraham didn't notice it until God wanted to reveal it. The answer to Abraham's problem was already supplied, but it was only revealed when Abraham took his step of obedience and faith. While Abraham walked up one side of the mountain with his problem, God had arranged it so that up the other side of the mountain was coming his answer. Please note, however, that God didn't reveal the answer until obedience was complete. Verse 14. Abraham fittingly named the place Yahweh Yireh, which means the Lord will provide. Abraham believed that God was a provider before, but something about this event made that head knowledge turn into heart knowledge. Verse 15 through 19. Abraham would have been content to walk back down the mountain and call this a win, but God wasn't done. He showed up again, repeating and expanding his promise to Abraham. I will indeed bless you and make your offspring as numerous as the stars and the sand on the seashore, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed by your offspring. This sounds familiar, but then God takes it a step further. The author of Hebrews points out that in verse 16, God makes an oath. By myself I have sworn. See Hebrews 6, 13 through 18. When God made his promise to Abraham, since there was no one greater for him to swear by, he swore by himself, saying, I will surely bless you and give you many descendants. And so after waiting patiently, Abraham received what was promised. People swear by someone greater than themselves, and the oath confirms what is said and puts an end to all argument. Because God wanted to make the unchanging nature of his purpose very clear to the heirs of what was promised, he confirmed it with an oath. God did this so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled to take hold of the hope set before us may be greatly encouraged. What's the difference between an oath and a promise? God's promise is what he is going to do when all conditions have been met. It's a guarantee, but God's oath means that he's ready to do it. You may have to wait for a promise, but the oath means that the promise is well on its way to fulfillment. It is because of these two realities, promise and oath, it is impossible for God to lie. See Hebrews 6, 13 through 18. His veracity assumes both. Verse 20 through 24. This short, seemingly incidental genealogy contains one name that should stick out to us. Rebekah. If Abraham's line was to continue, just as God had promised and sworn, then Isaac would require a wife. Rebekah would soon be that wife. Chapter 23, verse 1. Sarah died at the age of 127 years, which may seem like a random detail. However, I see God's gracious provision here. Sarah was 90 years old when Isaac was born. Not only too old to have children, but also too old to spend any significant time with them. And yet God gave Sarah almost 4 decades with her son. Even the span of our short lives rests in the hands of a God who cares about these details. Verse 2 through 20. Why all this talk about a burial plot? Remember where Abraham was, in Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Abraham was in the land of promise and saw his wife's death the opportunity to seize the first fruits of God's promise. This explains why he insisted upon paying the full price for his burial plot, rather than receiving it as a gift as Ephron and the other local leaders desired. Abraham knew he could hold no lasting right to a gifted grave. An actual sale, on the other hand, with an exchange of money and a company of witnesses, would give him a toehold in possessing the land of Canaan. And that is the end of Genesis chapters 22 and 23. 22 always makes me laugh because I envision it as like one of those prank videos where like you know you've seen on YouTube where people will like go to Walmart or whatever and they'll set up a camera in some random corner and then they'll just mess with other customers and be like, no, it's just a prank, bro. There's the camera right there.
Pranked, bro.
Like that's how I envision it, and it's hilarious. You know, Abraham takes Isaac up the mountain, straps him down, is about to come down with the knife, and then God's like, no. Cracks me up every time. It's hilarious. But I hope everybody learned something. Be sure to like and subscribe. God bless everyone, and I will see y'all next time.